So this video will demonstrate how to properly install a Federal Extended high voltage plug into a mating high voltage receptacle. For this demonstration, we're using a 3-pin Federal Extended plug into a 3-pin mating receptacle on this high voltage divider. Before making any high voltage connections, always make sure that the power to the X-ray generator is turned off and there is no high voltage present when you make or break any connection. Also, before making any connections, always make sure your equipment is properly grounded. Our divider tank here is tied to an earth ground. Prior to making any connections, inspect your high voltage plug. Make sure it is clean and free of any physical deformities. If any deep scratches or signs of past arcing are present, do not use the plug. Also, just as important, inspect your high voltage receptacle. Make sure that is clean, there's no signs of damage, and all previously used insulating grease or oil is cleaned out and you're ready to go with the clean plug and a clean receptacle. So the first method of installing this is using some dielectric insulating grease. And to start, apply a sealing gasket onto your high voltage plug and make sure the key of the plug lines up with a key notch in the gasket. The next step is to apply silicone insulating grease sold in tubes such as this one. The process starts by applying 3 even beads of grease down the length of the plug in a roughly 60-degree pattern. Then take a plastic paddle and evenly spread the grease all along the surface of the entire plug. So after spreading the grease, make sure it is spread evenly across the entire plug surface, and it's approximately 1/16 to 1/8 inch thick of grease. Ensure there are no dry spots anywhere on the plug surface. After evenly spreading the grease along the plug surface, apply a bead of grease in the center of your conductor pins that is approximately the same height as the conductor pin itself. Now, the next step is to engage the plug into the receptacle. The key of the plug will align with the keyway on the receptacle. So, making sure it's lined up, slide the plug into the receptacle. The keys will align, and you will feel the conductor pins engage into the receptacle sockets. Make sure that some grease was pushed up and out around the space between the flange of the plug and the flange of the receptacle, which means that the grease properly flowed everywhere inside the plug and receptacle. The next step will be make sure your wavy washer is seated properly on your brass flange. Then take your spanner nut and tighten it down into the flange. Fully tighten the spanner nut by hand until it can't be tightened any further. Then take a spanner wrench and tighten the cable nut an additional half turn tighten the cable nut an additional half turn to ensure proper engagement. Next, tighten the small Allen set key using an Allen wrench to make sure that the cable nut does not move. Once the Allen key is tightened, the plug is now installed properly and the high voltage may be turned on. To disengage the high voltage plug, first make sure that the high voltage is turned off. Loosen the spanner nut using the spanner wrench. Until it can be loosened by hand the rest of the way. Remove your wavy washer. Carefully pull the plug out of the receptacle. Remove the sealing gasket. And then always clean the plug of all residual grease before inserting it into another receptacle. Always clean the inside of the receptacle of all residual grease before inserting another plug. This video will show how to install a Federal Extended high voltage plug into a mating Federal Extended high voltage receptacle. For this demonstration, we're using a 3-pin Federal Extended high voltage plug, and we will be using a 3-pin Federal Extended high voltage receptacle. For this demonstration, we're using a high voltage divider tank. The first thing to make sure before making any high voltage connections is that the X-ray generator power is turned off and there is no high voltage present before making or breaking any connections. The next most important thing is to ensure your equipment is properly grounded. Our high voltage divider here is connected to an earth ground. The first step is to ensure the entire surface of your high voltage plug is clean and free of any physical defects. Clean using a paper towel and methyl alcohol solution. Inspect the contact pins of your plug for any physical damage. If there's any damage to the contact pins or the plug itself, do not use the plug. Make sure your high voltage receptacle is clean and any previously used insulating compound is fully removed. The first step is to slide your sealing gasket over the plug. The keyway on the plug will align with the notch in the gasket. This just slides over until the sealing gasket is fully seated on the brass flange. This installation will use mineral insulating oil. This is Shell Diala oil or equivalent. Into the clean receptacle, pour the insulating oil approximately 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Install the high voltage plug by aligning the key of the plug aligns to the key in the receptacle. Insert the plug and observe that the insulating oil flows up and out under the brass flange into the space between the receptacle flange and the plug flange. If oil does not flow up and out, there is not enough oil and you will have to remove the plug and add more oil. Excess oil will drain over and spill over the side, so be careful of that. Once the keys are aligned, press down until the plug is fully engaged. Clean any excess oil with a paper towel. The next step is to apply the wavy washer. And then finally, apply your spanner nut and begin tightening the nut by hand. Tighten the nut by hand until it's fully tightened and can't be further tightened by hand. Once you have fully tightened the cable nut by hand with a spanner wrench, further tighten the cable nut by an additional 1/2 turn. Finally, tighten the set screw in the cable nut using an Allen key. The set screw prevents the spanner nut from loosening. Once the plug is properly installed, high voltage may be turned on. To disengage the plug, first make sure that all power is turned off and there is no high voltage present. Unscrew the set screw in the cable nut using an Allen key. Loosen the spanner nut using the spanner wrench. Fully loosen the spanner nut by hand. Remove the wavy washer. Pull the plug out of the receptacle. Allow the oil to drip off. Fully clean the surface of the plug using paper towels and a methyl alcohol solution. Remove the blue sealing gasket. Fully clean the high voltage receptacle and drain any excess mineral oil at the bottom of the receptacle before reinstalling a high voltage plug.